supplies.
Yeah, that's entirely correct. The IPCC has estimated that over the next few decades, production of food could drop by about 2% per decade. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but at the same time, demand is increasing by 14% per decade. So climate change puts an additional handbrake on food supplies for the world, which is of grave concern.
How exactly does global warming cause a disruption in the climate? Such as causing droughts and flooding, things that we're seeing far too often.
Essentially, the greater energy content in the atmosphere causes all sorts of disruptions to the climate. So there's an increase in evaporation off the ocean surface. In evaporation, increases of drier areas, so that drier areas become drier. Rainfall intensity can increase over wetter areas, and that we can get an increase in the number of extreme events. So these, as we've seen in Gauteng recently, these sorts of events can also cause all sorts of disruptions. And then the long-term increase in temperatures, which over the long term also affects where we can grow crops, how effectively crops can grow. The distribution of diseases, for example, is driven by temperatures and changes in rainfall. And all of these things put together put additional stresses on the food supply system.
How will this affect you and me, our viewers out there? Will this push up the cost and quality of products that due to this climate change?
Without adaptation, food prices, this will be an additional upward pressure on food prices. We've seen over the last few years when there was a global failure in the wheat crop in Australia and America at the same time. When these things happen together in different parts of the world, it can really push up food prices. So these are things that affect our lives in a very direct way and can have all sorts of socio-economic effects.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the long-term effects that this is going to have on food supply, because we're talking about livelihood, we're talking about a basic product that we need to stay alive, and we can already see the cost of things going up so much. But I can imagine with adverse weather and farmers really struggling that the cost is going to be borne by the consumer.
Well, that's right. Farmers are actually very resourceful, and some of the impacts are a little bit counterintuitive. For example, if there's a reduction in water supply and water prices go up, what that tends to do is cause farmers to produce higher value crops like fruit and export them to make foreign currency. And it steers production away from staple crops like wheat and maize. And then we rely on imports for those food prices. So there's some complicated things that could happen driven by market signals, which we need to work with. And South Africa is actually working very actively with some economists to try and understand these sorts of complicated effects, which could have effects on things like food prices and jobs in the food industry.
We're talking about things now. Is there anything that can be done to avoid a situation like this?
There's an awful lot that can be done, and South Africa has embarked on a process called the long-term adaptation scenarios process, which is looking at how in different sectors South Africa can adapt to the various impacts of climate change on water, on food, on health, human settlements, on the marine ecosystem. So we've got a lot of scientists in South Africa and economists working together, working through these sorts of issues to try and understand how best we can adapt. And of course, the globe must mitigate. The world has to move itself off the dependence on fossil fuels, which is pushing up these temperatures and causing these issues. So there's a two-pronged attack. An international effort and a local effort, which together we hope will really help us avoid the worst of these impacts. And there's every chance that if we really focus on this, we can do that.
What do you say to the naysayers out there who really still believe that climate change, it doesn't exist, or it simply is not a result of our own industrialization, but occurs naturally, periodically, during the time span of our planet?
Well, very clearly they are unaware of the vast wealth of information that shows that view is incorrect. And quite frankly, we need to leave that behind. We have to move forward with the planning that we need to put in place. And you're always going to have a few naysayers. I do believe there are still people who are members of the Flat Earth Society. Let's leave those arguments behind. We need to really start thinking about what to do about this issue and how best to get the biggest benefits out of it, because there are lots of opportunities involved here as well. There are job opportunities, opportunities for better lives for a lot of people. Let's move forward with this and leave the naysayers behind where they deserve to be.
All right, let's leave it there. So, in a nutshell, climate change is a reality and something needs to be done urgently. We need to protect our world. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Guy Midgley. If you'd like to find out more about the SA National Biodiversity Institute, their website, you can visit it, www.sanbi, that's sanbi.org. And don't forget to send us your comments about climate change on Twitter. That's